Imagine standing in a room full of powerful people, and every single one of them is laughing at you. Not loudly, not cruelly, just enough. Enough to remind you exactly where they think you belong. Now imagine, in that same moment, a hand closes around your wrist. A voice drops low against your ear. Just one word. Stay. And the entire room goes silent. Her name is Amara Okoye. Nigerian-born. Sharp as a blade. An art consultant who built her career from nothing, in rooms that never truly wanted her there. She didn't come to the Belmont Gala looking for trouble. She came composed. Elegant. Ready. But trouble had already been waiting for her. Because her ex, Ethan Calloway, hadn't just brought a new girlfriend to that gala. He had brought a plan. And Amara was the target. But here is what nobody in that room knew. The man who stopped everything, the man whose hand found her wrist before she even saw his face. His name was Kenji Sato. A name spoken in whispers. An empire built in shadows. A man whose presence alone could shift the temperature of a room. He didn't rescue her because he was kind. He didn't step in because it was right. He did it because 3 years ago, in a burning warehouse in Lagos, she had saved his life. And he had been looking for her ever since. What you are about to watch is not a love story. Not yet. It is the story of a woman who survived everything alone. And a man who decided, quietly, that she never had to again. But Ethan Calloway wasn't finished. And what he had built around Amara's name was far more dangerous than anyone realized. She wasn't supposed to matter in that room. Amara Okoye stepped through the entrance of the Belmont Gala and felt it immediately, that familiar shift in the air. The kind that followed a woman like her into spaces she had earned but was never truly welcomed into. Crystal chandeliers floated overhead. Champagne moved from hand to hand in practiced elegance. Laughter drifted through the crowd, polished, performed, perfectly hollow. Amara's mind was already working. Crystal chandeliers. Champagne that costs more than rent. And at least 40 people pretending they don't know each other's secrets. Beside her, Zara Mensah, her oldest friend, Ghanaian-born luxury PR powerhouse, and the only person who could make Amara laugh against her own will, leaned in close. This room, Zara whispered, is full of men who peeked at their own weddings. Amara almost smiled. She adjusted the sleeve of her dress, simple, refined, intentionally understated. Back home in Lagos, her mother always said elegance didn't need to announce itself. Here, it barely whispered. She was scanning the room, reading the politics behind every polished smile, when she saw him. Ethan Calloway. Standing across the ballroom. Perfectly tailored. Effortlessly confident. And beside him, a woman draped in diamonds who hadn't yet realized she was being used as a weapon. For one unguarded beat, the wit dropped. The wound surfaced. Zara saw him too. Amara, she said quietly. Do not. But it was already too late. Because behind her, a hand closed around her wrist. Firm. Unmistakable. One word pressed low against her ear. Stay. The room went silent. 40 minutes earlier, the evening had looked completely different. Amara and Zara had arrived with their heads high and their expectations carefully managed. Zara had been tracking Ethan since the moment they walked in, feeding Amara quiet updates like a sports commentator who took her job very seriously. He's working the room clockwise, Zara murmured. Classic insecure overachiever pattern. Amara had laughed. Quietly. Because Zara was usually right. But when Ethan finally approached, he didn't attack. That was never his method. He welcomed her. Warmly. Publicly. Like they were old friends reuniting at a party, his smile wide, his voice carrying just far enough for the people around them to hear. Amara. You look wonderful. It's so good to see you here. The woman on his arm, Isla, was tall, polished, genuinely beautiful. And completely unaware that she was standing inside a trap. Ethan began his careful work. A comment about Amara's incredible journey. A compliment about how far she had come. Each word wrapped in silk. Each one carrying a hidden blade underneath. He always knew how to make an insult sound like applause. Amara's mind fired back in real time, sharp, controlled, occasionally brilliant. But beneath the composure, the cracks were already forming. Around them, Ethan's family circle began to gather. Drawn by instinct, the way people always gathered when theater was being quietly prepared. His mother arrived last. She looked at Amara the way someone looks at a stain on expensive fabric. And Ethan smiled. The performance had begun. Ethan made his move precisely when the room was paying attention. He pulled Isla closer, tender, natural, practiced, and turned to the small circle around them with the ease of a man making a toast. Isla just belongs here, you know? He said it lightly. Warmly. Like a simple observation. Some people have that quality. That ease. Not everyone does. The laughter that followed was soft. Polished. Devastating. Amara felt it land, exactly the way he had designed it to. Not a shout. Not a slap. Something quieter. The kind of words that slide past your defenses before you can raise them. 6 feet away, Zara moved toward her. Amara stopped her with the smallest shake of her head. Not here. Not now. Because this was the thing about Amara Okoye. She had survived rooms like this before. She had survived worse than Ethan Calloway and his borrowed elegance and his mother's cold eyes. She would not become a scene. Her internal voice, usually sharp, usually armed, went completely silent. No wit. No armor. Just the sound of a room full of people deciding she was less. She smiled anyway. The smile that cost everything. Her hands trembled inside the sleeves of her dress. Zara watched from 6 feet away, fury and heartbreak sharing the same face. And then Ethan leaned closer. His voice dropped low. Just for her. What he said next wasn't an insult. It was a threat. Something specific. Something planned. Something that told her this evening had never been an accident. Whatever it was, Amara's eyes changed. She was already planning her exit. Quiet. Dignified. Unhurried, because leaving quickly was the same as admitting defeat, and Amara Okoye did not do that. She set her champagne glass down on the nearest surface. Straightened her dress. Let one slow breath move through her chest. And then, a hand closed around her wrist. She didn't see him. She only felt him, the pull, sudden and certain, drawing her backward until she met something solid. Unyielding. A presence so still it felt like standing against a wall that breathed. A voice came low against her ear. Controlled. Unhurried. The specific calm of a man who had never once needed to raise it. Stay. The room reacted before she did. She felt the shift, that invisible ripple that moved through crowds when something genuinely powerful entered their awareness. Conversations faltered. Laughter died mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Ethan's smile vanished. His mother's hand tightened around her champagne flute. Even Isla, warm, oblivious Isla, blinked and went completely still. Across the room, Zara had gone silent. And Zara Mensah was never silent. Because the man standing behind Amara, the one whose hand had not released her wrist, whose chest she was still pressed against, was not just someone. He was the someone. The name spoken in whispers at tables like this one. Kenji Sato. Zara, from across the room, mouthed 3 slow, disbelieving words at Amara. Who is that? Amara didn't answer. She couldn't. Kenji Sato did not make a speech. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gesture or perform or explain himself in any way that could be measured or quoted afterward. He simply stood, beside Amara, around Amara, unmistakably for Amara, and the room rearranged itself accordingly. He looked at Ethan once. Said 4 words. Low enough to be private. Loud enough to carry exactly as far as intended. We're done here now. Ethan Calloway, wealthy, connected, cruelly practiced, nodded. He actually nodded. And the circle dissolved. People found other conversations. The gathering that had felt inevitable 60 seconds ago simply ceased to exist, like a fire that had run out of air. All of it, dismantled in under a minute. Without a single raised voice. When Amara finally turned to face the man behind her, she was prepared for many things. She was not prepared for how calm he was. She was not prepared for the almost smile at the corner of his mouth. And she was absolutely not prepared for what he said next. You look well, Amara. 3 years. 3 years, and he appears in this room, in this moment, with his hand on her wrist and that voice in her ear, as if Lagos had never happened. As if she had never made the choice she made. As if she hadn't spent 3 years building a life specifically designed to keep this moment from ever occurring. The fury that moved through her was quiet. Total. Absolute. Across the room, Zara was already typing into her phone at emergency speed. Amara pulled him toward the terrace before she knew she had decided to. Zara took 1 step to follow, and Amara's expression stopped her at the door. A look that said, I need 5 minutes. Stay here. Do not cause a scene. Zara stayed. But she watched. Outside, the terrace was cool and empty. The city glittered below them. Amara turned to face Kenji in the open air, away from the performance inside, and every piece of composure she had been holding finally found somewhere to go. What are you doing here? He looked at her. Unhurried. You know what I'm doing here. I know what it looked like. I want to know what it was. The same thing. A pause. Did you think I wouldn't find you? That sentence landed differently from everything else. Because it wasn't cold. It wasn't a threat. It was quiet and simple and carried the weight of something she hadn't allowed herself to think about. He had been looking. Which meant the last 3 years, her carefully built distance, her clean slate, her practiced feeling of having escaped, had been an illusion. Amara's internal voice, usually her most reliable weapon, offered her nothing. She stood with that for a long moment. Then Kenji spoke again. There's something you need to know about tonight, he said. About Ethan. About why this gala, and your invitation to it, was not an accident. He wasn't looking at the city. He was looking at her. And for the first time since the hand closed around her wrist, Amara felt genuinely afraid. 3 years earlier. Lagos. Amara was 29, mid-career, and building something real. She had a reputation in Lagos's private art world that had taken years to grow, one that opened quiet, expensive doors most people never knew existed. When the referral came in, anonymous client, high-end authentication job, undisclosed location, she took it. She always took the difficult ones. Difficult meant interesting. She arrived at a waterfront warehouse dressed like she owned it. Because her mother had told her since childhood, you enter every room like you were expected. Even when you weren't. What she found inside wasn't just art. The pieces were real, extraordinary, actually. Bronzes and carved ivory and woven cloth that belonged in museums. But surrounding them was something else entirely. Men in quiet conference. Money changing hands in ways that had nothing to do with culture or history. A negotiation she was never meant to witness. Amara read the room in seconds. Catalogued the exits. Calculated the distance to the door. And then, across the room, a man looked at her. Kenji Sato. Younger than she expected. Completely still in the way dangerous things were still, not because they were calm, but because they were deciding. He looked at her like she was the most interesting problem he had encountered in a long time. She looked back the way her mother had taught her, like she was already planning her route out. Then the doors sealed behind her. And a voice across the room said Kenji's name in a tone that meant everything was about to change. It happened fast. The way violence usually did. A rival faction moved on the warehouse, organized, deliberate, the kind of ambush planned while negotiations were still in progress. The lights cut. Men scattered. Something shattered against the far wall with a sound like a gunshot. Amara did not run. She pressed herself against the wall and let her mind do the only thing it knew in a crisis, map the space. Every wall. Every door. Every corridor she had clocked walking in, out of habit, because she had been raised in a city where knowing your exits was good sense. She found Kenji by sound, his voice, low and controlled, directing his two men in the dark. She made a decision that had nothing to do with strategy. "There's a service corridor," she said. "Behind the east panel. Follow me." He could have questioned her. He didn't. She led them through 12 steps, one turn, a door that required her shoulder against it, and then they were outside. Air. Distance. Safety. Kenji turned to her in the dark and looked at her for a moment that felt much longer than it was. "You didn't have to do that." She straightened her jacket. "I know." And then she walked. No name offered. No payment accepted. No backward glance. She disappeared into the Lagos night because she understood, even at 29, that staying would cost her something she wasn't ready to give. She never heard what he said quietly to the man beside him. "Find out who she is." Back at the gala. Present night. "I know all of it," Kenji said quietly. "I was there." Amara looked at him steadily. "Then you know I made myself very clear." "You did. I built a life that has nothing to do with your world." "You did that too." She searched his face for something, a tell, a crack, anything she could use to make sense of this moment. She found nothing she could read. He was completely, infuriatingly still. "I don't want protection," she said. "I don't want whatever you're about to offer. What I want is to understand why you walked into that room tonight and touched me like you had the right to." Kenji was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that stopped her completely. "Your ex has been making calls. For 3 weeks. Professional calls, the quiet kind designed to close doors and leave no fingerprints. I knew about it before you walked into this building tonight." Amara went very still. "He didn't start this because of what happened in that room," Kenji continued. "He was already moving. Tonight was simply where he wanted you to feel it." The silence stretched between them. 3 weeks. He had already decided. Everything tonight was staged. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Kenji looked at her with the same steadiness he carried everywhere. "Because you saved my life. And I don't forget." Her phone vibrated. A message from Zara. "Amara. Come inside. Right now. Something is wrong." Kenji's offer was simple. That was what made it dangerous. He didn't negotiate. He didn't promise. He laid it out the way he did everything, quietly, completely, as though the outcome were already settled and he was simply informing her of it. Protection. His people. His reach. A wall built around her professional life that Ethan Calloway would not be able to touch, regardless of what he tried. All she had to do was stop walking away from him. Amara listened. Let the silence sit. Then said no. Clearly. Cleanly. Without apology. Because she understood what protection from a man like Kenji Sato actually cost, not money, not loyalty, not gratitude. It cost proximity. And proximity to his world was the exact thing she had walked away from in Lagos. She went back inside. Zara was waiting, and the expression on her face meant this conversation was going to be different from the one Amara had been expecting. 2 of your clients received phone calls tonight, Zara said quietly. During the gala. From a number registered to the Calloway family business. Amara absorbed that. He didn't wait. He started before the night was even over. She left the gala alone. Head up. Composed. Because Amara Okoye had never let anyone see the cost of holding herself together. But in the back of the car, finally, completely alone, she let the shake move through her hands. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Silence. Then a voice she didn't recognize. He's going to bury you. Unless someone stops him. The line went dead. It started small. The way quiet things do. A client canceled a Monday meeting with no reason given, just a brief, polite email. Amara told herself it was coincidence. Her internal voice agreed. People cancel. Diaries change. The world does not orbit Ethan Calloway. She called Zara anyway. Zara was already on it. By Tuesday, she had traced a pattern through her PR network, 3 mutual connections, 2 cancelled endorsements, 1 withdrawn gallery recommendation, all within 48 hours of the gala. By Wednesday, a second client withdrew. Then a third. And the internal voice went quiet. Zara arrived at Amara's apartment that evening with food, her laptop, and the kind of expression that meant she had found something she didn't want to say out loud. It started before the gala, Zara said. Amara looked up. The first cancellation, the Harlow Foundation, that email was drafted 6 days before the gala. It just wasn't sent until after. Zara turned her screen around. He didn't react to that night, Amara. He'd already decided. The gala was the delivery. This was the preparation. Amara sat with that for a long time. He built the walls before she even walked into the room. The humiliation was just the door. There's something else, Zara said carefully. She pointed to a name appearing in 3 separate withdrawal chains. Not Ethan's name. Someone else. Someone neither of them had encountered before. I don't know who that is yet, Zara said. But whoever they are, they did the actual work. The sabotage was surgical. Ethan hadn't shouted. He had whispered, into the right ears, at the right tables, with exactly the right amount of concern in his voice. I just worry about some of the associations she's been keeping. For her sake, you understand. That was all it took. In their world, it was enough. Amara fought back through every legitimate route she had. She made calls. Wrote letters. Requested meetings. Showed up, composed and professional, to conversations that were already over before they began. Because legitimate channels meant nothing when the man dismantling her operated above them. She was sitting in her office 3 weeks after the gala, running out of moves, when her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown contact. 6 words. I think we should talk. Isla. Amara stared at it. Zara, standing behind her with coffee, read it over her shoulder and said nothing for 3 full seconds. For Zara, that was practically a year. Is that? Yes. Are you going to? I don't know. She met Isla at a quiet cafe 2 days later. A corner table. No one they knew nearby. Isla arrived looking like someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. She sat down. Placed a folder on the table between them. Photographs. Documents. A timeline that had taken real effort to build. Then she looked at Amara with the steady eyes of a woman who had finally stopped pretending. I think you need to see what I found. What was inside that folder was not what either of them had expected. Kenji Sato appeared at her gallery event on a Friday evening. No announcement. No invitation. He simply walked through the door the way he did everything, quietly, completely, as though he had always been expected. Amara noticed him from across the room and felt two things simultaneously. Frustration. And something else she refused to name. He didn't approach her directly. He moved through the gallery slowly, pausing at each piece with the measured attention of a man who actually understood what he was looking at. Other guests noticed him, the way they always did, and the room's temperature shifted accordingly. Conversations softened. Spaces opened. 3 doors that had been closed to Amara's business began, quietly, to reopen that same week. She confronted him at a dinner neither of them could escape 3 days later. You're doing this on purpose. Yes, he said simply. I didn't ask for it. No. You didn't. She waited for more. He offered nothing. Later that same evening, she watched him from across the room, this time without him knowing. He had stopped in front of a small Lagos-era bronze sculpture in the corner. A piece she recognized. His hand moved toward it, not touching, just moving toward it, and for exactly 3 seconds, his face changed. Not dangerous. Not composed. Something quieter than anything she had seen from him. Human. She didn't know what it meant. But she didn't forget it. Beside her, Zara watched Amara watching Kenji. Said nothing. For once in her life, Zara Mensah said absolutely nothing at all. She found him alone after the dinner and said everything she had been holding. Men like you, Amara said, her voice controlled but carrying everything underneath it, confused protection with possession. You insert yourself into my life without being asked. You reopen my doors without my permission. You make decisions for me and wait for gratitude. She stepped closer. My independence is not a problem for you to solve. My career is not yours to rescue. And I am not something you get to manage. Kenji listened. All the way through. He didn't shift or deflect or turn the conversation towards something more comfortable. When she finished, he said 2 words. You're right. Quiet. No performance. No charm layered on top. Just, you're right. And that was the most dangerous thing he had done yet. Because Amara had armor for a man who pushed back. She had nothing for a man who simply conceded. The space between them felt different afterward. Neither of them named it. Neither of them moved toward it. She went home. Called Zara. Reported the conversation word for word. Zara was quiet for 5 full seconds. Then. Amara. You are in so much trouble. I know. He said you're right? Yes. Amara. But before either of them could say more, Amara's phone buzzed. Her largest client. Calling, not messaging. The voice on the other end was not asking for a meeting. It was threatening legal action. Based on a document they had received. A document with Amara's professional signature on it. The document had Amara's professional signature on it. Authentication certificates. Her name. Her credentials. Attached to an artifact acquisition trail she had never knowingly been part of, stretching back 2 years, built to look exactly like the work of a consultant quietly facilitating stolen cultural pieces for a private network. Her largest client had received it that morning. Amara sat with the document for a long time. Her hands were steady. Her mind was working. He didn't just want to damage her. He wanted to end her entirely. That evening, Kenji came to her. He didn't announce himself. He simply appeared, the way he always did, and for once she didn't fight it. She showed him the document. He studied it. Then looked at her. And told her the truth. He hadn't stepped in at the gala on impulse. He hadn't offered protection out of obligation. He had done both because 3 years ago, in a burning warehouse in Lagos, a woman who owed him nothing had chosen to save his life. "I don't do things without reason," he said. "And you, since that night, have been my reason." It was not a declaration. It was a confession. Offered with no certainty of what she would do with it. Amara's internal voice, sharp, guarded, always 3 steps ahead, had nothing. She went home. Opened the folder Isla had given her. Started reading from the beginning. On the 3rd page, she found a name. A name that connected Ethan Calloway directly to the Lagos warehouse. 3 years ago. The picture that emerged was not what Amara had expected. She had expected jealousy. Maybe obsession. The kind of destruction a wounded ego builds when it feels humiliated. What she found instead was architecture. Ethan's family auction house, prestigious, generational, above reproach, had been quietly moving stolen cultural artifacts for years. Bronzes. Ivory carvings. Ceremonial pieces stripped from their origins and laundered through private sales to collectors who asked no questions and paid very good prices. The Lagos warehouse had been one node in a much larger network. And Ethan had known she was there. He had known almost immediately. Known she survived it. Known she had said nothing. And known, with the cold calculation of a man who collected useful things, that her professional reputation could become the perfect instrument of deflection if the network ever came under scrutiny. She hadn't been his girlfriend. She had been his exit strategy. His insurance policy. His carefully kept backup plan. Zara called a lawyer within 10 minutes of hearing it. Amara sat across from Isla, who had known pieces of this, not all of it, and watched the woman absorb what the full picture meant. "He used both of us," Isla said quietly. "Yes." A silence settled between them. "How long have you known about the artifacts?" "I suspected 2 weeks ago. I confirmed it yesterday." Isla nodded slowly. Looked at her hands. Then Amara's phone buzzed. A message from Isla's number, except Isla was sitting directly in front of her. Someone else had Isla's phone. It moved fast. Someone tipped off an investigator, private, but with just enough official connection to make the process feel legitimate. By the following morning, Amara's authentication certificates were part of a formal inquiry. The artifact trail pointed directly at her name. Cleanly. Completely. As though she had signed every document with full knowledge of exactly what she was signing and why. Zara was managing the public side, careful statements, controlled silence where silence was needed. The lawyer was building a response. Amara sat in her kitchen at 6 in the morning, completely still, understanding with absolute clarity how clean Ethan had made this look. How many months he had been quietly, carefully building it. Then her phone rang. "Kenji. Don't go into the office today." She looked at the wall. "How long have you known?" she asked. Silence. The kind that answered everything. "Long enough," he said, "that I should have told you sooner." She didn't speak for a long moment. "Where is Isla?" "She's not answering." "Someone has her phone." Another silence. Longer this time. "That's part of what I need to tell you," he said. His voice, usually so controlled, carried something she hadn't heard from him before. Not fear. But the thing that lived right beside it. Is she safe? Amara asked. She will be, he said. By tonight. Amara closed her eyes. Kenji. Yes. Fix it. The silence that followed was not hesitation. It was the sound of a decision already made. By nightfall, everything had changed. Kenji moved, and this time there was no controlled stillness. This was the other version. The one the gala had only suggested beneath the surface. The forged documentation disappeared. Not destroyed, corrected. Traced back through its own paper chain to the person who created it. The authentication trail was dismantled from the inside, replaced with a record that told a very different story about who had been facilitating what, and for how long. The investigator received new information before noon. By afternoon, the direction of the inquiry had shifted completely. Ethan's auction network unraveled over a single business day, exposed through channels Amara didn't ask about. The kind of exposure that happens when someone has held the right information and finally decides to apply heat. Ethan Calloway, polished, connected, protected by generations of money, found himself on open ground with nothing above him. Isla was safe. She had been moved quietly, 2 days earlier, when Kenji's people realized Ethan knew she was talking. Amara heard all of this from Zara, who heard it from the lawyer, who couldn't explain the source. She sat with it. Her name was clean. Her career was intact. The rescue had worked. But she had seen what it took. The scope of it. The darkness underneath the precision. Her internal voice asked the question she had been avoiding. I know what he did for me. But do I know who he is? Kenji didn't come to her that night. He gave her space. Which told her more than everything else combined. She went to him 3 days later. Not because she needed saving. Not because she was grateful. But because she had questions only one person could answer, and she was done being afraid of the answers. Zara said it plainly before she left. Whatever you decide, decide it as yourself. Not as someone who's grateful. Not as someone who's scared. As Amara Okoye. I know. And Amara? I already know what you want. I just need you to know it too. She found Kenji at a building she had traced through careful inquiry, because if he could find her, she could find him. He didn't seem surprised to see her. She asked him everything. About Lagos. About the 3 years. About the darkness she had witnessed and whether it kept him awake or whether he had simply made peace with it. He answered. Honestly. Uncomfortably. Without managing the conversation toward a better version of himself. He told her about the warehouse, from his side. About watching her walk out of that service corridor into the dark Lagos night without a backward glance. And then what? She asked. And then I found out who you were. And spent 3 years wondering why someone like you made a choice like that for someone like me. He paused. I'm not offering you a cage, Amara. I never was. She looked at him for a long time. Her internal voice, her faithful companion through every room she had survived, was completely silent. Not because it had failed her. Because she already knew. She left without answering him. Not because she didn't know. But because the answer deserved to be chosen in full light, not in the warmth of a room with him in it. She went home. Made tea. Sat in the apartment she had chosen, furnished, built into exactly the space she needed. The career she had protected. The independence she had chosen, over and over again since Lagos. It was good. It was real. It was completely hers. But there was a space in it now that hadn't been there before. Not a wound. Not a weakness. A space, carved out by a man who had stood beside her when the room decided she was less, and then given her the freedom to walk away from him entirely. She called Zara. Said nothing for a moment. Zara said, I already know. Go. She went. Not running. Walking, with the same unhurried elegance she had worn into the Belmont Gala on the night everything changed. The kind that didn't need to announce itself. The kind her mother had given her. You enter every room like you were expected. Even when you weren't. When she found him, she didn't make a speech. Her internal voice was calm. Present. Sure. She looked at him. He looked back. And she said the only thing there was left to say. I'm not walking away this time. He didn't say stay. He didn't need to. Because this time, she already had. Later, a message arrived from Zara Mensa, unopened and unanswered. Well. Amara. Full debrief required. I have snacks. Call me.